Hi everybody, I'm Tabby. Welcome back to Take Heart, or welcome to Take Heart if you are brand new. You've joined for an amazing video because this video is really going to get to the heart of what Take Heart is all about. Could I have said heart more in that sentence? I created Take Heart over a year and a half ago with this video in mind. I always knew I was going to share my mental health story. I always knew I was going to talk about my self-harm history, because Take Heart means be brave. Take Heart means be courageous, and it stands for hope, and it stands for a light at the end of the tunnel, and it stands for things getting better. I wanted Take Heart to be that symbol that things change, that you're not broken, that there's nothing wrong with you. I felt that so much. I felt like that was my lot in life, that I was on this earth to be crazy and damaged and broken. I even tried to take my own life because I didn't want to be here anymore. If that was what my lot was, what is the point in sticking around? That stress, that depression, that anxiety, the weight that you're carrying, you don't have to carry the burden, you don't have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, and that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There is something else in store for you, because there was something else in store for me. I started talking about my mental health journey on my blog because I found it a lot easier to write. This is the first transition into filming it. Just because it's a serious topic, it doesn't mean I don't want this video to be light and happy and fun and silly like all my other ones are, because when we give the illness too much credit, it ostracizes us, it makes us different, but we're not different, because loads of people are having mental health issues. We should be able to just talk about this over a coffee on a Tuesday. Do you know what I mean? It shouldn't have to be such a heavy thing to share with somebody. The more we shame it and ostracize it and make it heavy and miserable, we keep it behind closed doors, and that's what happened with me. I carried so much shame, I didn't dare talk about it, and I lied about it for 10 years because I thought I was going to be seen as crazy. Actually, if I'd just opened up, I could have saved myself a lot of hassle so much earlier. I was really hesitant to make this video, as you can imagine, but maybe not for the reasons you think. Firstly, I was really hesitant because I'm just so afraid I'm not going to do this justice. Like, I want Take Heart to be so powerful and to really help people and reach people. What if I kind of fluff this video? What if it doesn't have the impact I want it to have? What if it doesn't reach that one person because I just didn't quite say the right thing, or I didn't quite speak into their heart? Do you know what I mean? Secondly, I'm afraid of people's judgments around my family or my friends in my life. So I don't want people to watch this video and think, well, why didn't her mum know this was happening? Why didn't her dad know this was happening? Why didn't they do this, this and this? Because that just wasn't the case. It wasn't that I was going to my parents asking for help and they weren't giving it me. It's that I was hiding to such a degree and I didn't understand how ill I really was. So how could I even vocalise that? I really want this video to be taken in isolation and just my experience. There's no point in blaming or judging because it's done. If you're a parent or a carer like watching this and you're like, yeah, but I want to know what I could do differently, I'd argue without knowing you, you're doing your best. There is not a simple answer to this, do you know what I mean? Finally, I was afraid to make this video because this is just my experience, and I didn't receive that much psychiatric treatment, and I don't know all the technical terms, and I don't know what is triggering and what isn't. So just a fair warning here, folks, if you're easily triggered, potentially this isn't a video for you, because I don't really know what the trigger things are. I mean, I'm not going to get my scars out and flash them about, but do you know what I mean? So just be mindful of that. So I want to speak from my experience and speak into people's hearts, that if this is how they're feeling, they're not alone, and they're not crazy, and they're not broken, and they're not damaged. But equally, I'm not here to try and fix it or give you practical advice of how to get better, because I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not trained in this, and all I can do is offer my perspective and my experience. I've already been tearing up. This is so embarrassing. Okay. I don't really know whether to start at the beginning or at the end. Maybe I'll start at the end and then go back to the beginning. Okay, so a little bit about me, I guess. I'm 27 years old, and the last time I cut myself was 2 years ago. I have probably exhibited a self-harm behaviour within the last month. I used to withhold food from myself as punishment. So yeah, food is still a bit of a struggle for me, but it's not anywhere near like what it used to be. I would go days without eating in the past, and now it's like a couple of hours and then I flip myself out of it, like, stop being an idiot. I think bottom line, it's down to self-worth and how you view yourself. And I used to think that I was bad and that I deserved punishment and deserved hurting, but equally there was so much going on around me and so much emotion building up inside of myself, I just had to get it out. So it was dual-pronged for me. It was that I thought I deserved to be punished, but equally I just needed to release that pain. Self-loathing, self-hate, self-beating is serious stuff. It's serious attack on yourself, and with all of that going on, that creates serious pressure, and you have to get rid of it somehow. I would consider myself recovered, although that's never been like diagnosed. I've never been discharged from psychiatric care, like, tick, you're better. And I don't know if you ever are completely better. Whenever anyone asks me about it, I say it's a bit like AA or like drug addiction. I will say 2 years since I last. Do you know what I mean? Because I just don't feel like you can ever truly say you won't do it again, and that's not very positive, is it? Yeah, it's, you know, it's always going to be tempting. Like with an alcoholic, they're always going to be tempted to have a drink to cope with whatever's going on in your life. It's very clear to me when I feel tempted and when I don't, and it's based on how I view myself and how I see my self-worth. And at the moment, for example, I'm going through some stuff. I'm choosing to believe that I'm worthless, and so last night I just wanted to disappear. Had a little cry and just wanted to disappear. Those are the moments that a little voice in my head just says you could cut and it'll go away. Just cut and it'll go away. And it doesn't happen very often. It really doesn't happen very often. Bless anybody watching this, you don't need to have an intervention for me or get me into counselling. It's only ever so rare, but it's there, do you know what I mean? All right, and so where did it all start? Another disclaimer, I've kind of given a few at the beginning. My memory is really bad. Huge chunks of my life that are blacked out, I don't remember. When I first got to university and went to my first counsellor, she was a bit like, how are you here? When I kind of talked about things I'd been through, she was like, the brain can only cope with so much. The way she explained it to me was a bit like a computer, but she kind of said that like your brain is in two halves and there's a little processor in the middle. And when things happen to you, they get processed through and go into like memory. And that processor is like the microchip in the computer. So when it's working fine, everything's happy, the computer's working, it can work at a really high rate. But when traumatic things happen to us or we go through a trauma, it damages the chip a bit. And if you have so much trauma in your life, the chip gets fried. And so your brain stops processing things properly and all the other different parts of your brain starts to shut down. She said to me the fact I could sit exams and like get into uni was a bit of a miracle because my memory was slowly shutting down and I couldn't retain information. That is still pretty true of today. I'm very aware of how bad my memory is and how bad it's getting. I have a diary and I write every single thing down because I just can't remember things. And that's actually a little personal positive for YouTube, is that I'm putting my life on the internet so I can still remember it. Like I can go back and watch vlogs from last year where I forget that I did some of that stuff and then it's like, oh yeah, I went there. Oh yeah, that's awesome. And sorry, there was a point to that. That is just going to prove a bit of a challenge when I'm relaying my self-harm story, because there is going to be bits that I don't remember. There are blacked out bits. There are pieces of the puzzle where I'm like, I think it was like this, but I can't quite remember. So roughly where I remember it starting, I was 13, 14, and I used to like, the only way I can describe it is like nick. Like not cut, just like catch bits of my feet. I'm half Iranian, half English, so I've got very dark hair, very light skin, and I was shaving from a really young age because I'm hairy. And I remember shaving my legs and, you know, catching myself and kind of feeling a release and just feeling a bit calmer. And I would enjoy sitting and like watching the cut kind of form and develop, and I found it quite fascinating. And so in the bath I would always get out with shaving cuts, but it was never an issue because I was a young girl just learning how to shave. That's always going to happen. And you know, your ankles are like the worst bit, so I started catching myself around my ankles, and that's where it was like, I don't know, I feel like I thought, I enjoy this. I knew it was wrong, but I thought if I do it around there I'll get away with it because people think that that's just a shaving cut. I feel like that's where it started, and I would just nick my ankles, nick my feet, catch my hands sometimes, but only very rarely, and I would have lots of shaving cuts on my legs anyway that were kind of part of the problem, but just a bit of an accident too. And I did that kind of intermittently, not constantly, for a couple of years. It wasn't until I was about 15 or 16 that I eventually got a razor and actually like stamped on it so that I could get just the blade out. So obviously when you have a lady's razor, it's all encased in plastic, and I remember stamping on a disposable razor to get the blade out, and then that's the first time I had my own blade that I kept, and I would go and get to use, and I don't know where I hid it, I don't know. And so with that was the first time I started doing uniformed lines of cuts. I did them a little bit on my legs, on my thighs, and a little bit on my arms, but they were never very deep. It was almost like experimenting, and I know that sounds a bit weird, but they were never deep. It wasn't really about pain at that point in terms of like how bad it eventually got. It was more like, I like how this feels, it makes me feel better, but I knew I didn't want to be scarred. I knew that like I wanted to be able to hide it, and I didn't want to be any weirder or different, or like most young girls do. I thought I was so ugly, so I was like, I don't want to be scarred on top of ugly and hairy and spotty, do you know what I mean? I remember around then was the first time it came to my mum's attention. So back in the day, with old mobile phones, you know, Nokias or whatever, when you took the SIM card out of the phone, your messages could still be on the phone. And so me and my brother had swapped phones for some reason. Don't know why, but I took a SIM card out of the phone where I'd been texting a friend telling her that I was cutting myself. And he obviously then put his SIM card in and read the messages. I might be wrong, but the way I remember this conversation, it wasn't a massive deal. I remember actually being accused of lying. I feel like it was a conversation where my brother was like, what are you saying that for? You don't do that. And mum going, yeah, is this true? And because my brother had already set it up as, well, you're lying, what have you said that for? I just went like, yeah, sorry, I was lying. Like I'd fallen out with this girl and I just wanted her to be my friend again, so I just said it. That's how I remember it. And then I just don't ever remember it being mentioned again. I think it just went away. When I was at college, things got a bit worse for me. I started to pull my hair out at that point. Now, at that time, I wasn't doing it because I thought it was self-harm. I didn't realise what I was doing. Like, it's only now when I look back, I go, oh, yeah, that's a self-harm behaviour. Do you know what I mean? At the time, I didn't see the cuts and the hair at all related. They were two completely different. The hair wasn't even a problem. I didn't actually even see it as a problem because I didn't really realise how much I was enjoying it. So the hair thing, it's a bit of a weird one, right? But back in the day, girls used to glue in their hair extensions with this black glue that smelled of fish. It was absolutely awful, but everybody was doing it, so I wasn't weird for doing it. All the bottom of my hair, like this, was just covered in tracks and this black glue. Every time you would wash your hair, the glue would loosen, or every time you wanted to put in a new set of hair, you would have to take those out. And the way that you did it was you like soaked your head in conditioner, absolutely soaked it, and got like a really fine comb or a knit comb, and you like pulled on the track at the root. So you were like, or you could just pull it out at the bottom, but I used to do it at the root. And then once you'd gotten all the tracks out and all the hair out, there was loads of black glue in your hair. So you'd have to go through with the fine comb and get all the glue out. So that as a process was what plenty of people did. It wasn't anything that weird, but I would do it like obsessively. Even if I didn't have like a new set of hair to put in, I would take the tracks out maybe every 2 to 3 weeks. Every time I'd take the tracks out, I'd have a ball of hair. Like I'd sit in the bath and do it and then collect all the hair up. Like I don't know if enjoyed it is really the word. And obviously I was balding myself. So once I eventually did quit hair extensions, pretty much the bottom half of my head was bald. Still recovering from the thinning and the bald patches on the under part of my hair. And it's only just started to get healthy again. Like my hair's now my baby because of how much I hurt it. And I would just sit there and just sit like this and just pull the hair out and just pick at bits of glue and pull the glue out, and I could just be sat like this, just pulling and pulling. And as I say, I didn't see that as a problem. I didn't know until now when I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, I was pulling my hair out. Started when I was about 17 and went on to about 22. It wasn't until I was 23 that I finally got my hair cut short, got rid of hair extensions and kind of never went back. I did hair pull for a little while, but then that transitioned into scratching, which we'll get to. At college, I was cutting and pulling my hair out, and the cuts had gotten a little bit worse, a little bit more frequent. This point, obviously, drinking is introduced in a really big way. I'm going out in town when I'm 17. I had my first boyfriend and my first breakup, my first heartbreak. You have all the normal pressures, and I also had a lot going on at home, so everything was just getting worse. The feeling that I wanted to get rid of was getting worse, so the cutting was getting worse because I just needed to release it and needed to let it out. University was confusing for me. It's probably the worst time of my life, and not in one of those best and worst times. It was just the worst time of my life. I went to the university counsellor pretty quickly in my first year. However, the problem that is rampant with mental health issues is that waiting lists are so long. So even at university, the counsellor waiting lists were really long. I had to wait ages for a first appointment, and then any follow-up was just like every 2 months or something. And unfortunately, those gaps were filled with heavy drinking and cutting. So even if one session had been helpful, it was never going to be helpful enough. I don't remember when the first time I was prescribed antidepressants was. Definitely when I was at uni. I don't know if it was first year or second year, but if you're not au fait with antidepressants, there basically isn't a diagnostic test that can be done for what antidepressants you should be on. Generally, it is a try and test method, so it's quite precarious. Like, you will go, they'll start you off on something dead low and dead small, and you'll see how you get on for like 2 months, and then you'll go back and they'll go, okay, well, we'll give you a bit more of a dose, or what, you kind of felt like this, well, maybe we'll change to this pill on this dose. It's really about trial and error. So I started on my antidepressants and was ramped up every single time I went back because nothing was helping, but I was also drinking like a fish. So anyone that ever talks to me about antidepressants now, personally my opinion now is don't bother, but equally definitely don't drink, because like I would drink, then I would forget to take them, so I would come off and that would go cold turkey. So I wasn't responsible with my medication at all. I think if you can be responsible with your medication, or if you're in a controlled environment, you've got somebody that's monitoring you, then potentially it could help you. I don't know your situation, but for me it was a nightmare. It made everything so much worse. I struggled with university. I really struggled with the academics, not because I'm not smart enough, but because my attention span isn't very good, my concentration isn't very good, and because my memory is so poor. So I actually really struggled to study. I struggled to sit down for any length of time and focus on things. So performing poorly at uni was just adding to my low self-worth. I already had a chip on my shoulder that I was common and that I was thick, or that I was from a poor family, so I didn't deserve to be there. Then I couldn't actually do it. That didn't help. Didn't go to so many lectures. I wouldn't turn up to exams. I went to Nottingham Trent University, and actually fair play to the history department for how much they tried to help me. They really did their absolute best. They really gave me so many chances. My second year was when the cutting and the starving myself really ramped up. You go to university thinking like, oh, this is it now. This is like my time, because yeah, I wasn't pretty or popular or, you know, any crazy thing you think about yourself at my secondary school or at my college. But you know what, this is the big wide world now, so this is where I'm going to find my place, and boys are going to like me, and I'm going to be beautiful, or I don't know, like, it really was based a lot on looks with me. I've never been diagnosed with any kind of dysphoria or anything, but there was a lot going on. I think it is just low self-esteem. I don't think it needed a diagnosis. I would go home and like hack into myself. Like, the tops of my legs now are pretty ruined because of what I did in that second year of uni. Also, when I would fail an assignment, when I wouldn't pass a deadline, when things were going on at home, I couldn't take the pressure anymore. So what had started as a bit of an experiment, oh, I kind of like this, developed into a coping mechanism, but controlled, lost complete control in my second year of uni. I had no control over it anymore. It became manic, and I just needed to get the pain out. My second year of uni as well is where I got my very own medical kit. So I had a first aid kit with my own razors, with everything in, all ready to go. I remember going on a surf trip to Morocco with the university surf team and packing my first aid kit. Like, it was something that just came with me everywhere. And I cut twice while I was in Morocco. So I think I've already said, like, mine wasn't constant. It was like there would be real pits and real lows and real manic periods, and then there would be probably 3 months where I would do nothing. I'd be doing plenty of other destructive behaviour, but that didn't include cutting. Okay, so where are we at now? I'm like 20. Oh, I moved to America for a little while, and I didn't cut when I was in America. I was a lot happier over there, but then I had the challenge of, we were in California and we were all going in bikinis, and I attached a lot of value to my weight, and I was quite a chubby girl when I was in America, so I was like fat with scars all over me. How am I supposed to be in a bikini? So I would always wear shorts. You would never see me in bikini bottoms. And actually there was a time where I would look in the mirror and I hated every single thing I saw except for those cuts. That's illness. That's a sickness, and I just didn't see that I was ill. I didn't think there was anything wrong with that. When I came back from America, I picked up the counselling thing again, but with the NHS. I was referred to a psychiatric outpatients unit in Nottingham, and that's the first time I started to go see a psychiatrist. First time I started to see a psychiatrist regularly. By regularly, again, it's the NHS, so it were like every 2 months, but he was quite helpful. He is the first person that I remember telling me that it wasn't my fault, that I wasn't broken and that I wasn't bad, and that this was just a period in my life and that it was gonna change, that I wasn't going to be sick forever. He added some anxiety pills to my meds. When things would get really bad and I was going to cut, I was supposed to take one of these pills because that would calm me down. But I enjoyed the cut. Again, this is where I say medicating might work, but if you're really in the pit of your illness and you can't see the wood from the trees, then it's not going to help. Whilst I was under care of that doctor, they did some tests for bipolar disorder, or tried to diagnose bipolar basically, because my moods were just so erratic. I was up, down, up, down, up, down. I was the life and soul of the party, or I was completely crashed out. I was spending ridiculous amounts of money. Obviously I was self-harming. They'd already diagnosed me with depression, so it was kind of like trying to piece all these things together for a bigger diagnosis. What I remember being told was that my manic periods and my low periods weren't for a long enough amount of time, because I could switch like 4 times in a day. They said that wasn't typical of bipolar, that was more typical of manic depression. So the actual only diagnosis I've ever had for mental health issues is manic depression, because I believe, I mean, I don't really know why, but I believe self-harm and anxiety disorders falls under that. Do you know what I mean? By 21, I definitely felt hopeless. I felt like there was just, this was it. And I was broken. I keep saying it, but I thought I was broken. I thought there was some wiring in me that just didn't work properly, and I would look at everybody else coping and I just wasn't, and I couldn't understand. Also, the internet just wasn't what it is now. And I hate to be that old fogey that says that. I'm only 27, but like, we didn't use Instagram in the way that Instagram is used now in 2011. Was that when I was 21? 2011? Yeah. So in 2011, Instagram was literally your drunk photos with your mates, actually using the filters in Instagram. Heaven forbid. Like, it wasn't a community. Twitter, I think, had kind of just started, but it wasn't the mental health like platform that it is now. I didn't know about or have an internet community of people I could go to and be like, are you dealing with this? Are you going through this? At this point though, when I was failing on my modules, I was living in a house of people that hated me, I was drinking all the time, I was kicking off, I was miserable, I was high, I was spending money like no one's business, I'd started sleeping around, I was cutting all the time. This is when I came forward to my parents. This is, I don't really remember. Again, I don't remember, but I know that there was Facebook messages back and forth, because my money was so erratic. I wouldn't pay my phone bill, or I would break my phone when I was drunk. So I remember not really having a phone that year. We were always being cut off or something. And I would Facebook message my dad and my mum, who barely had Facebook at that time. I think my mum had a farm on Farmville, and talk about wanting to die and telling them that I couldn't go on any longer and I couldn't take it anymore. And they're up in York and I was in Nottingham, and it was, I feel like my dad said a few times, if you need us to come get you, we'll come get you. But I knew going home wasn't the answer. I knew that I wasn't going to be happy there. So I wouldn't let them. In the summer of 2012, I was sexually assaulted. This is a video for a different time, but I was raped, and as a result of my erratic behaviour leading up to it, the event, and then the spiral that happened afterwards. I also got like demoted at work. I was a supervisor in a retail store and I got demoted, and so I just had my consent taken away. I'd been violated, I was demoted at work, uni was a mess, I felt like I had no friends. I decided that was the point, I was going to end it, and that's when I attempted to take my own life. I took a bunch of pills and I hacked into myself. Again, I know that's such a gross, crude word, but there's just not another way to describe the frenzy. Do you know what I mean? I just wanted it over and I just wanted it done. Ultimately, had enough sense to contact a friend, and my friend Matty came and got me and got an ambulance, and I was in hospital, and I thank God to this day that I survived. I thank God to this day Matty was around. It was like the summer, so everyone had left uni. I'm just so grateful. It could have been so much worse. I was really, really lucky to come away with very minimal consequences of my actions. From there is where I decided enough was kind of enough, and it was time for me to be more open about what I had been going through for the previous, what at that point, 7 years. Like, it was time for me to start talking about this. Luckily, that choice was also kind of forced upon me, because in my frenzy, I had started to cut my arms, and I'd never done that before. Up until that point, it was all on my legs, or if it was on my arms, it was super, super light so that it would heal. I had stitches on my arms. I used to say I was like Frankenstein's bride. I looked awful. I decided that that was my turning point. That was the point that I just stopped lying and I stopped hiding, and I just owned it and just said what it was. I think even like the day after my stitches came out, I went to work in a short sleeve top, because I just thought, what can hurt me now? Your disapproval, your judgment. I'm at rock bottom. I don't care. I ended up getting into a relationship, and this is really interesting because something that I've always had fear of my entire life is that men would reject me because of my scars. I would look like Frankenstein's bride, I would look all cut up, and why would they want that? And it's actually been the complete opposite. I've never had a guy mention it to me. In this relationship, we'll call him Jack. With Jack, his approach was, are you still cutting? No. Okay, is it something I need to worry about? No. Then it's not a problem for me. He wasn't bothered by the scars, he really wasn't, and unless it became an active issue, then it was nothing for us to talk about. Some of his friends would ask, because the thing I've had quite often in my life is that people don't get it. It doesn't fit, because I'm this confident, bubbly, articulate, fun girl. How have you got scars? Like, they just don't understand. It doesn't gel. It is round peg, square hole, or whatever that phrase is. And it's not that those two things don't go together. If anything, those things go together far too well. The people that you least expect are hurting in private. They're ashamed in private. And actually, that's why I'll never regret cutting my arms or trying to take my own life, because it stopped the lies. It stopped me hiding without me being given the choice, because to have the choice to do that, gosh, you've got to have some stones. I didn't have a choice. It was out there. It was out there, literally on my arms for the world to see. Gary and I ended up breaking up. Jack. Jack and I, his real name isn't Gary, by the way. I haven't let it slip. Jack and I broke up. It was always going to break up. I was not mature enough or in a stable enough place to be in a relationship, and I did cut over our breakup. Gary won't watch this. This isn't to get to him about it. He actually messaged one of my best friends around the breakup, like, can you just really keep an eye on her, because I don't know that she's going to do that. And I attacked him about it. I was like, how dare you say this about me? Like, you think I'm crazy. And then I just went and did it. So after that breakup, I got very focused on work. And this is kind of now another blurry bit. This is the bit that I never know how to explain to people. I don't understand how to tell people how I got better, because I pretty much sacked off the meds. It wasn't working. I was too erratic. I was too all over the place. I was drinking too much. I've literally stopped drinking in the last 3 months. So I can't attribute removing alcohol from the situation as the reason I got better. I was still drinking once I got better. I think I got fed up. of the self-fulfilling prophecy. I got so fed up of telling myself that I was broken and useless and stupid and empty, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna like prove something. I'm gonna do something and try. And gosh, there was so many missteps along the way. There was so many times that I would go 6 months without hating myself and then just have one bad night, or, you know, 2 months and one bad night. The big episode stopped. And I think it was kind of, I was working really hard, and I really believe that work makes us healthy and happy. And so I was part of the House of Fraser management trainee program, and kind of with that came the promise of London, right? And this promise of a career and this promise of a different life. And so I was like, right, if I graft and graft and graft for this 1 year, I can get to London, and that's where my life is really going to change. Happiness is not provided by people, places or possessions. I learned that the weekend, actually, so I'm saying that like everybody knows. I learned that the weekend. I really believed that if I got to London I would be happy, and that wasn't true, but that's the motivation that I needed to focus. That year wasn't particularly easy. There was plenty of things that went wrong. There were plenty of things that were really hard. As I say, I did trip up sometimes, but it almost just started to fade away for me, actually. For me, having scars that were publicly visible meant it was always a topic of conversation. You would not believe the amount of people that asked me about them, which I don't mind now, but at that point, when it had only been a year, or I was still in it, it was quite difficult. Or that thing, right, if you're wearing like a low cut top and a bloke's talking to you and he's going like, yeah, I had that with my arms. I would be talking and having a conversation and somebody would be going like, yeah, all right, okay. Because of that thing again where it didn't match up, they didn't get it. People would always be looking, and so every day it was a conversation, it was a part of me, it was part of my identity, and so it was kind of like, I do want to stop this because I don't want to be defined by that. I think I've only cut myself once since being in London, so I would have considered myself recovered. A year in, I was friends with some girls from work, and we all went out, got very drunk, and an argument ensued between me and one of the girls. There'd been bad blood there anyway, and I was being as awful as she was being awful to me. I'm not trying to paint her in a bad light. Let's call her Betty. I'm not saying Betty was totally wrong and evil and I'm such an innocent angel. It wasn't that. I said plenty of horrible things to her, but Betty turned around and said to me, well, at least I'm not a freak who cuts her wrists. And that just knocked me, because for all of the people looking at my arms, for it becoming a conversation, for me being more open, actually when you volunteer the information and when you're open, people commend you for it, actually. Like I'm not gonna lie, I get a lot of praise for how open I am. People aren't often critical to me. They can say whatever they want behind my back, but I don't think I've ever had to my face somebody judge me and be nasty. Like I said, boys that I dated and relationships, actually it never became an issue, so your friends are never going to comment on it, are they? Like, yeah, I'd never had that. That was the first time somebody had like attacked me for it, and that just knocked me. That absolutely ruined me, and I ended up going home drunk, crying myself to bits and cutting again, because I thought, well, if I'm a freak, I'm a freak. The big behaviour I had in London was the scratching. I wasn't cutting anymore because that left very real scars, and I needed to stop leaving evidence of my illness, do you know what I mean? So I would scratch until my skin bled, because that would heal a lot easier and a lot better, and it was easier to hide, it was easier to explain away in different ways. And sometimes I wouldn't even be conscious of it. It would be in stressful environments. So if I was in a performance review, I would just sit like this, or like sit like just scratching. And I did it 2 weekends ago. I was talking to a friend about my assault, and I was just sat like this, and he like took my hands and just stopped me, and I was like, oh, so like I don't realise that I do it sometimes. It's just like an embedded behaviour. So yeah, so that's where the scratching started. I don't consciously scratch anymore, and as I say, 2 weeks ago was probably the first time in a really long time that I've noticed myself do it. It was a very specific conversation about something pretty horrible. So I said that time with Betty is the only time I've been attacked for my scars, and that is true. But I had a really interesting one in one of my jobs, where I was at a social event for work and the big boss was there, and I like leant across to like get something, and he was stood there and he saw my arm and he like turned to me and was like, oh, so you're a cutter? And I was like, no, not anymore. It's something in my past. It was you know, the way that I coped, and I'm not ashamed of it, but I wouldn't say I'm a cutter now. And he was like, right, because I'm really interested in that. Like, why do people do it? Like, why do this? Why do it? Yeah, because it's kind of an attention thing, isn't it? Or it's kind of this, it's kind of that. It's really, really weird. That's just something that'll always stick with me. I'm not trying to like garner sympathy or praise or anything, but people do comment on me being very strong, or the way that I talk about things being very matter of fact. And it's because that's the kind of thing that you deal with. The people looking, or 90% of the time people do ask, and they ask very politely and they're very respectful, and especially when you know it comes from someone's good place. They're not trying to be horrible to you, they just want to know, they're just interested. I guess the final part of my self-harm story is kind of like the last year, so since creating Take Heart and what that has meant. So I've written a couple of posts on my blog about my experience and things that I felt, and the views that they get now are still the highest versus any other content that I've created on my blog, which shows that there is a need for this. There is a need for people to speak openly about their experience because there are people looking. Also, in the last year, I got to work with Look Fantastic on the I Am Fantastic campaign. They invited me on that campaign because I was open and honest about who I am and what I've been through. I was so petrified to tell them that I was a self-harmer because I thought, oh my gosh, this huge international $1 million company isn't going to work with me. And when I thought like that, I went straight into that broken, empty, afraid girl. I made myself Frankenstein's bride again. I made myself broken and useless by thinking that way. And I just kind of caught myself in the thought and was like, no, share it. Share it right now. Tell them, be open, because if they don't want to work with you, then that's not somebody that you want to work with either. You own where you came from, you own what you've been through, it makes you who you are, and you don't regret a second of it. I sent it over on email and I got a response within like an hour just saying like, we loved you anyway. You're now just amazing to us and we would still love you to be part of this campaign. And when we were on set, we did a one-on-one interview. I'll link the video down below if you want to go see it. I actually spoke so frankly about self-harm. I don't think they could use a lot of the footage because at the end of the day, they are still a business and it is still commercial, and some of the stuff I came out with, they must have been like, oh, that's amazing, but we can't put that in a video. The kind of like bit of that campaign is that everybody got given a word and you had your own hashtag. So there was like, I am honest, I am beautiful, I am. And I was given strong, I think. Was that my first word? I think my first word was strong, and I went out of the room. So I recorded my bit to camera where I just said, I am strong. And then I left, and then they came back and got me and were like, Tabby, can you come back? We want to re-record some bits. They were like, because we want to change your word. We want to change your word to brave. And I just burst into tears and I just looked straight down that camera and said, I am brave. There are so many people out there struggling with this. There are so many people cutting behind closed doors, hurting themselves, starving themselves, pulling their hair out, scratching, all kinds of other disorders that just because I don't have experience of, I can't mention here and now. And I'm very aware that I've tried to film a video about this and keep it under a certain time limit, so there is so much more to this that I haven't really been able to say. But whatever mental health issue you're struggling with right now, whether it is self-harm, anxiety, depression, you are brave. And if you dare to hope that something's going to change, if you dare to know that this isn't your life, you are the bravest of them all, because it doesn't have to be. I was in an illness for 10 years from the age of 13 and I'm out. You can be too. That boyfriend that I mentioned, one of the most valuable things he ever did that will stick with me for the rest of my life is he sent me an article that was people that didn't make it until they were 30. So it was all people like J.K. Rowling and Steve Jobs. Like J.K. Rowling was unemployed on benefits when she was pitching the idea for Harry Potter. Steve Jobs got fired from Google and then went and created Apple, or maybe that's the other way around. All of these people that had overcome hardships in their life to create something amazing and find their niche and find their success and just soar. He sent that to me and was like, that is you. You're gonna make it someday. You're gonna be happy someday. Just because it's not right now and because you're going through all this right now doesn't mean it's never gonna happen. So the future for me and my self-harm is that I just keep talking about it every single day. And if every day you have a dark thought, you speak it out. And when you speak it out, you take away its power. I'm very, very lucky that I have a community of people that love me. But if you don't feel like that, if you feel isolated, the internet is incredible. I wish that I had Twitter and Instagram in the way that other people have it now. If you want to message me, I'm more than happy to listen. If you want to comment, today is the day that the little voice is speaking up, then we can totally talk. There is someone in your corner, there will be, and you don't have to hide or be ashamed. I'm not ashamed. I told you earlier, I had a thought last night that made me want to do it, and I'm just going to tell you, and I say it with a smile on my face because it's just a thought. And I took away its power and I threw it away. I'm really glad that I sat and filmed this. I'm probably gonna edit it and hate it, but at least I just started. I mean, this could be my self-harm story volume 1, and then I could maybe streamline it volume 2. I could add a bit more depth for volume 3, maybe do a Q&A. If anybody had any questions, I would be happy to answer them. I feel like this has been a good starting block. This has been a camera. I was having a moment there as well. Thank you so much for watching. I, gosh, couldn't appreciate it anymore. It's not just listening to me that you've done by watching this video. You've opened yourself up to listen to somebody else that could be possibly going through something you have no idea about. And that saying is my favourite saying, where it's like, be kind always, because people are fighting battles that you'll never know anything about. You can go forward now just being that little bit kinder, or just asking those questions. Yeah, I think I'm gonna wrap it up there. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for spending your time, your valuable time watching this video, and I'll see you again really, really soon. Bye.